Good evening, everyone, and welcome on this lovely warm evening to the Guildhall for the Community Safety Partnership annual review. As you know, I'm your chair, Councillor Rachel Carnack, and the role of this committee is to scrutinise performance and take a closer look at topics of interest across the council services, making recommendations to Cabinet where necessary. We also deal with the call-in of Cabinet decisions and decide whether these decisions should be referred back to the decision maker to think again. Also present this evening, we have Councillor Connie Nolan as Member of Cabinet for Community Safety, Engagement and Inclusion. She's been invited this evening to answer questions about specific issues under her portfolio and linked with this evening's special themed report. Welcome, Councillor Nolan. Some housekeeping, it's the usual housekeeping. There's no fire alarm planned for this evening. Should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. Please meet at Tower House car park. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. Please note that this meeting is being minuted, filmed and made available to view in live and archive form via the Council's website. If you are seated in the public gallery, it is possible that the cameras may capture your image. If you wish to avoid being filmed, make a member of staff aware and they will direct you to where to sit. Finally, the Westgate Gardens on the riverside are locked at sunset. Not that that will bother us this evening, I doubt. But so members of the public should leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door. Right, okay, moving on to the meeting then. Apologies, please, Andrea.
We have apology for absence from Councillor Simon Worley.
And do we have any substitute members?
There's no substitute for Councillor Worley.
Okay. Do we have any declarations of interest by members or officers?
Thank you, Chair. I'm a director on the Canenco board. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have no public speakers this evening. So first thing, can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on June the 3rd, 2026 as a true record by General Assent, please? Thank you. And then, so we will move to agenda item 6, page 12, which is the Community Safety Partnership Annual Review. And we're here to note the report and receive a presentation from Director for People, the Senior Enforcement and Community Safety Manager and Chief Inspector Paul Stoner. And thank you all for being here this evening. Our presenting officers, Director for People Marie Royal, Senior Enforcement and Community Safety Manager Lacey Dixon. And I would like to invite you all to give your presentation, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much this evening for your time. I will just wait for the presentation to come on screen. We had some wonderful tech issues earlier, so we're hoping for a smooth run now. These are the elements that we'll run you through tonight. So the first of these is the structure and the purpose of the Community Safety Partnership, just to ensure you're aware of the statutory functions within and why we produce the documents and the plans that we do. We'll then highlight to you some data from our strategic assessment and how we came to prioritising the key areas for the partnership for this next 3-year period. We'd love to have the opportunity to celebrate the successes from our last Community Safety Action Plan, so we'll share some of those highlights with you, and then take you to our workshop feedback, just reiterating the kind of questions that we asked to partners and elected members and community leaders during those 2 conferences, and then give you an example of some of the actions that have come out from that feedback and have formed part of that Community Safety Action Plan that will be in place for the next 3 years. Lastly there, just touching on funding, nothing can move without any money, unfortunately, so we will highlight some of the areas where we have been successful and where we aim to progress some of those actions from within. And lastly, information, how you can feed in, the public can feed in, and how we can have that communication for going forward. So first of all, community safety partnership, is a statutory function, and there are key partners within that. And two of those are here in front of you today, so Kent Police and the local authority. There are others as well. Ultimately, they are the crime fighting agencies, but that goes wider in terms of adult social care, as well as those specifically that focus around young people as well. So just to give you that understanding of the breadth of that, so even including mental health services and substance misuse support services. In amongst those agencies, we have different levels in which we support the community safety partnership. So the first is the executive group. This is formed of a strategic nature, so those that are able to sign off on funding, commit resources, and ensure that ultimately the partnership is functioning in a way that has long-term solutions and that no one is working in silos, which is the core priority for a community safety partnership. The operational group is exactly that. It is officers who are able to communicate on a project-based level, making sure that we are delivering the community safety action plan. And then you'll see just below that the tactical groups. Now, these are officers that are on the ground on a daily basis, and they will ensure that information on a case basis is shared to have our long-term solutions, and feed that back up through the structure, through the operational to the executive, ensuring that all information is shared with those partners that are relevant. You'll see on the right hand side there we've got the community safety engagement, all out days and drop-ins. So these consist of coffee and a cop, engagement days on, say, our hotspot locations where we have particular crime types or concerns or fears. These are the opportunities again where that can feed in through the partnership. The yellow squares you'll see at the top are our priority areas from the last 3 years. And below those are other meeting forums where you will find specific partners of an even wider breadth who support the action to enable a positive impact on those crime types and priorities. There are 2 links here. The presentation slides will be shared with you afterwards. The first one links to our website where you'll find the Community Safety Action Plan in summary. And also there is a link there to the terms of reference, and that's for the meeting structures that you saw on the previous page. So if it's of something of interest, feel free to have a look through that. It will explain to you wider and in more detail the partners that are involved and the requirements of them. So the last part from me for the moment is just around our key duties and strategies. So while we have to have the responsibility of reducing crime and disorder and antisocial behaviour, we have key duties and strategies that we are also responsible for. And you'll see on screen there, we have serious violence, we have domestic abuse, prevent, and that's around radicalisation as well as national terror threats. As well as the other sort of thematic elements such as the fallout from COVID. I know we thought we were all finished talking about that, but ultimately we're only really seeing some of the beginnings of the long-term impact of that. So these are things that still come to the forefront of our planning and ensuring that we have a trauma-informed approach with a lot of the work that we conduct. So I'm going to hand over to Paul now, just to give you a bit of an insight to our strategic assessment data. This data is from all partner agencies for a year period, and they will highlight key trends, issues, emerging issues, and as a community safety partnership coordinator, we pull that data together and confirm the key focus areas that the partnership need to consider for the next 3-year period. So over to you, Paul, to highlight some of the successes, because this one absolutely is.
Thanks, Lacey. Good evening, everybody. I will try and keep this relatively short because I appreciate there might be some questions that people want to ask, and I think I'm more interested in the questions and the feedback from yourselves than I am necessarily in this data. So the data is, I think I'm right, Lacey, is actually 6 months old now, because obviously when this was requested, it was back in November, and by the time the report gets put together, and then obviously we present it to you, that data is actually out of date. It's a snapshot in time. However, what it is, it's a reflection of the work and the culmination of the work that we've done as part of the CSP, which then gives us that performance, if you like. So in terms of that, you can read it yourselves. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by reading through it. Most of the offences you can see largely are going down, which is good. And that theme is carrying on at the moment. Do you want to do the next one? So the recommended priority areas and themes that we've got there, obviously throughout the priorities and specific themes, we'll have core themes which will form part of the decision-making process. So these are where we have the priorities from each different organisation. So obviously for Kent Police, it's always going to be about putting victims at the forefront of our activity, as well as obviously working with our communities. And that then is backed up by the uplift that we've had recently into our neighbourhood policing teams. There has been a significant investment from the force, and hopefully some of you have seen that benefit on the ground, which obviously is designed to support our communities and reassure them, as well as also supporting the most vulnerable within our communities. A lot of it is around reducing harm. We do a lot of work in relation to that. I'll touch on it later on in the presentation, but at the moment the government's focus for us is reducing knife crime and what that looks like. And Canterbury is one of 3 districts on the east that has what they call a knife crime concentration fund, which is a very small area, but I'll cover that off in a minute, because ultimately that does a lot of harm within our communities. And then yeah, thank you. That's right. And then obviously we're moving into other areas, again, preventing violence against women and girls. That remains part of the Kent Police Control Strategy, right at the heart of it. And that is around supporting women and girls, obviously reducing the violence towards them. And then also child-centred policing. That again is one of the key strands of our work that we do around how we can prevent and how we can support the youth of today to make sure that they're not going to go on and commit crime later on. And then obviously the other part again is that community safety aspect. It's a safe place to live and work. So they're the sort of assessments and the themes, if you like, that we have, and obviously the work that we then undertake should, in theory, drive towards those strategic themes.
Thank you. So this last year was the last of 3 years from our Community Safety Action Plan, and we completed 38 actions within that plan. And these aren't small wins, they are long-term, multi-partner agency projects with successes. So wanted to highlight how some of that looks in terms of those projects. While we have that meeting structure I showed you earlier, just because they're in place doesn't mean that we just consider it done. We are constantly reviewing the referral forms for partner agencies or members of the public, making sure they are fit for purpose, that we're not missing any gaps, and we learn from lessons where there have been unfortunate circumstances. As well as the right partners. Constantly there is turnover in organisations, so it's about making sure that as those roles change, we have the right people in the right places to do the right things. Training packages, again, while we all might be professionals or experts in our field, we're not numb to the fact that it's an ever-changing world that we live in, and so we are always offering training packages around specific key themes as well. This morning we've linked up with a very much a trauma-informed training package to roll out to all the community safety partnership partners as well. So it is really something that we are forever at the forefront in terms of offerings. Then multi-agency operations, you will have seen, I'm hoping, during some of the news articles, we have had a number of operations dealing with delivery drivers, for example, in the city centre, and the risk that has had to pedestrians. We have had waste carrier operations, again, jointly with Kent Police and other agencies. I will touch on some of the facts and figures on those later, because I think that will be of something of interest for you, as well as exploitation and trafficking. Unfortunately, as much as it is hidden, it is something we are aware of and very much want to make sure we reduce any impact on. The youth offerings across the district, we've specifically led on quite a few of these this year and seen some really good numbers of engagement as well as those outcomes. So we had Gossip and Games this year, Give It a Go, Soccerina, and Connect and Thrive was another as well, really focusing on not only engaging these individuals and diverting their attention potentially from other pathways, but offering a real whole wraparound service in terms of a holistic approach and making sure we deal with the source of where the behaviour is coming from, not just the behaviour itself in that moment in time. So these are some of our examples with the detail now. Graffiti is one that we have had a really strong focus on over the last several years. The internal team, along with Can & Co, are doing an absolutely great job. I hope you will agree. Graffiti is looking fabulous across the district in as much as it is not there as much as it used to. One of our successes quite recently was an individual who had multiple tags which were identified. We took that one to court and conditions were imposed where we had a £480 fine that was being given back to the council for the cost of removal and managing that damage. But also, as I talk about the wraparound action, we had a forward trust alcohol referral attached to that condition as well, because it is about the reasons and the depth behind it, not just that incident. And then also an online crime impact course. You know, it's about awareness and engagement and understanding and appreciating the impact that has on others. To the very realistic elements, such as not being in possession of spray paint cans. So as you can see, these conditions are very specific and thought out in terms of actions for that individual. Licensing operations, we have now wonderfully got a new officer in the licensing enforcement team. We work very closely with Kent Police, Immigration, SIA to manage all of our licensed premises as well as our ranks. And we've had, again, you may have seen in the news, some very successful outcomes from our proactive work on that. We have another one of those operations coming up very soon. Fly tipping, I believe, is one that you're probably all quite keen on. So I wanted to share with you 4 examples of recent cases. One where we saw something that was quite different that we haven't seen before, and that was a 12-month community order of 100 hours unpaid work. This is not what we would normally see from an outcome at court, so we were quite pleased to see that. It's of a greater gravity than a fixed penalty notice. But they do, in addition, have a £114 surcharge and prosecution costs of £200, which again come back to us as a local authority for having to take that work in the first place. The second one I wanted to highlight was around failure to produce documents. During operations, when we do stop and searches on street, they have a particular number of days to share with us the required documents to show that they have carried out their duties officially and appropriately. Failure to do so is an offence, and so we took that to court. We had a fine of £660, a victim surcharge of £264, and they were ordered to pay £200 in costs as well. So as you can see, £1,124 later, that individual may think twice, and word spreads. So we hope that that will continue to do the right thing for our district and neighbouring. The second to last of these was around, again, no waste carrier licence. So where they are stopped, they don't have a licence. That, again, is an offence. So they were fined £1,000 with a £200 surcharge and £200 costs. So as you can see, you know, these are hefty fines. And it is starting to make an impact. We are noticing that we are getting an increase in waste carrier licence applications, and especially around scrap metal as well. So the last one I want to highlight is around scrap metal, who had no licence to do so and had a £400 fine, £160 surcharge and £200 costs. So the team worked really hard on this. It is about information on the ground, but it's that collective information from both the public and our partner agencies. The last one I want to highlight is a new one, and one that I'm sure will be of interest to you, around short-term rentals and waste management. There are a lot of properties who or a lot of individuals who have properties who rent them out, but are using their usual domestic waste contract, if you like, with the council to manage their business entity. And that's something that we're really cracking down on. So just since March, we have issued £12,000 worth of fines to these individuals. And we have got a very good payment rate because we've had £10,800 of that already paid. So we are seeing some good compliance, and again, word will spread, but there is quite the job still to do on that because there are many as a seaside town. Okay, so thinking on parking then, hopefully you will have seen in the report that we have covered 68 schools in the coastal area, 54 schools in the city area and 27 schools in the rural area. And that's resulted in 137 penalty charge notices and a lot of information and warnings to individuals. So we will continue that good work, continue cycling around all the schools across the district, and do share any priority ones with us, and we'll do our best to cover those. One that I really wanted to highlight today actually is around probation and female offenders and the correlation with domestic abuse, because this is something that we have noted to be a continuing and increasing trend. So females who are leaving the care of the system, who have served their time, we have found that there is a correlation with returning to volatile relationships, and that cycle of domestic abuse actually resulting in them returning back into the criminal justice system. So there is a project that's very specifically been set up to support these young women, older women, middle-aged women of all ages, working alongside our refugees who specifically can support with their trained expertise. So really well-focused projects that are coming to fruition. And I will hand over to Paul for the next few points, if that's okay.
Yeah. Is that on there? Oh, sorry. Oh, the points on there. Sorry.
Just the last one.
I'm with you. Right. So the coast obviously is always going to attract some attention, especially as we move into the busy summer period. We've done a lot of work on the coast, and there was a couple of slides further on which we'll cover off in a second. We have significantly uplifted our neighbourhood policing resources out there. I think our promise last year was that we would have 24/7 policing response based at Herne Bay. We now have that. So you have got 2 officers based there 24/7, 7 days a week. We've also got our neighbourhood task force based out of there as well. And we've also, for the summer coming, we've got a substantial uplift. We've been successful in securing a lot of money from the Deputy Chief Constable in relation to policing the coastal towns and what that looks like. What we've done is it gets a bit complicated. I don't want to lose you in the weeds, if that makes sense, but we've overlaid the demand profiles of previous years and highlighted what they call red and amber days, which we know are going to be significantly impactful on the force in terms of demand. We've then looked at what resources we've already got in place with the planned uplift. And then on those days where we're lacking in resources, we've planned further uplift of officers. So in theory, every Friday, Saturday and Sunday throughout this summer period, there is a significant investment and uplift of officers alongside the Section 34 dispersal orders that we're putting in place. Now, that's not necessarily going to stop the spontaneous events that happen. You might suddenly get a party that occurs on the beach or a gathering of youths. That isn't going to prevent that. But on the days when we expect it to be busy and we know it's going to be busy, there is a significant investment from us to actually deal with the coastal issues. Some of the work we did outside of the summer months was around Project Platinum, and that was targeted towards dealing with antisocial behaviour. There is one on it, but I'm going out of sync in relation to the presentation.
I'll just like when you tell.
Okay. So what we did is we had our child centre policing team set up a community youth hub in conjunction with the Baptist Church, who let us have access to a ground floor flat that had a kitchen in it, which had a pool table in it. We then staffed that with our child centre policing team officers, but we did it in a targeted way in that we identified the 10 most prolific children. I was going to say the worst children, that's not right. The 10 most prolific children who were committing a disproportionate amount of crime in that area. And then we worked with them over the course of many, many weeks for several hours each week, where we had that engagement and built that trust and rapport. And there's a slide coming up where you'll see the before and after of that, and how actually their involvement in criminality significantly dropped off. We got them back into mainstream education. Wasn't successful in every single child. There was one that didn't engage with it, but 9 out of the 10 did. And as a result of that, their offending levels have significantly dropped. The problem with that is that it's not necessarily solely a police matter. And that's where the community safety partnership has to come in, because we're picking up for other areas of the business that should be done or could be done by other agencies and departments. And it's how we then sustain that moving forward in the longer term, and what the legacy of that looks like. In terms of the crime, we are dealing with significant issues, again, in relation to shoplifting and retail crime. For Canterbury, I think I've got another slide on this. I'm going all out of sync here, aren't I? If you want to. I'll cover this off. Let's do this first. So some of the operations we've had in place for the city over the past 12 months, some of them Lacey's already mentioned. I'll pick out one or two. Odin, I think, is a long-standing operation that we implemented at Canterbury probably about 2 years ago now, that has been adopted and rolled out across the county as best practice. That is purely designed to target retail crime, not just in the city, the coast as well. I've taken a bold step and invested heavily in that from within my own resources, to the point where I've now got a bespoke team that actually deal with all shopliftings. It's the sergeant and 5 officers. Every single shoplifting that comes in, or report of a shoplifting, they triage it and they assess it, and where we can solve it and arrest people, we do. Some of the figures in relation to that are startling. If I just find the right part of this bit. Stand by. Let me go back. Got to find it. There we go. So in the last rolling quarter, for example, recorded shoplifting is actually down nearly 20% across the whole Canterbury district, whereas our solved outcomes, so the number of offences we're solving, is up nearly 40%, which is a rise from 147 to 203 offences, and it's the 3rd highest now in the county. Our charges, so the number of people we're actually charging and sending to court for retail crime, is up nearly 74%. We've nearly doubled it. We've gone from 98 to 170. Again, that's now 2nd highest in the county, which is actually only behind Bluewater or Dartford, because they've got Bluewater. Then the recorded shoplifting, like I say, is down nearly 20%. It's down 130 offences. So my NTF now proactively go out and arrest and target those shoplifters as well. We do a lot of plainclothes operations, but it's also about target hardening and actually reducing the problem at a root cause. So a lot of the work we do in custody is around drug treatment orders and referrals, and we're also seeing a huge rise in the number of criminal behaviour orders that we're being successful for at court, where once we've charged them and sent to court, the court impose a criminal behaviour order, which allows us further powers to then deal with them. Some of the other good work that we've done there, Op Ratio, Op Love, they're all linked in. That's the theft from motor vehicles and theft of motor vehicles, where we then issued air tags to people as part of a community reassurance. They were able to then put that air tag onto their motorbike or onto their push bike if they wanted. And then obviously if it was stolen, they would then be able to track it and tell us where it was. We've had some huge reductions in the levels of theft from motor vehicles. I've got some more up-to-date data, but I'll bore you with that. But it's a significant drop in terms of that. Obviously, we're doing a lot of work around Project Vigilant, which directly links into our violence against women. We're doing a lot of plainclothes operations in the city, targeting taxis, targeting Ubers, but also targeting the behaviour of men and women around our nighttime economy once the pubs and clubs have kicked out. A lot of the other operations on there are bespoke, as I say, some of them for Op Salvador around nuisance bikes and scooters in the city, as well as these Op Samurai, which is the nuisance use and violence offences, which actually is targeted towards wildlife. We've got some cases going through the court at the moment where we've got some horrendous video evidence of these children killing wildlife, and that's something that we can't really publish details about yet because they've not yet been to court, but please be assured that we are dealing with it and it is being taken further. Should we do the next one? So then the coast, specific over to the coast. So Op Cold, ironically, is our operation to target the ASB in the summer. As I said, we've got a significant amount of money from the DEP, which is allowing us to uplift. We also have cancelled officers' rest days. So with effect from July the 24th, when the summer holidays start, there is additional 2 sergeants and 10 PCs working solely on the coast to deal with the ASB and the increased demand that we would inevitably see. But then, as Lacey's touched on earlier on, a lot of it is around the partnership working, certainly with the Herne Bay Health Alliance that we've got. That's come off the back of Project Platinum to target some of the underlying issues around why people commit crime, around health, unemployment and things like that. Obviously, we've still got the Whitstable Weekly Engagement Hub, the National Retail Crime Alliance. We're doing a lot of work with them, again, around shoplifting. And I have just started the process of trying to get a business crime reduction partnership set up over onto the coast. We work very closely in the city with the bid, and they have got the BCRP accreditation now for the city, which is really positive. And what we would like to do is replicate that and extend it further out to the coast. But obviously the bid are limited because they are restricted in theory to the city walls. Whereas we're looking at who we can get to take this onto the coast and actually run it as a proper BCRP, and then extend the City Watch, the Radio Watch scheme, back out to the coastal towns. Some of the good work, some of you probably read that on there, but we've had closure orders that have been secured for addresses causing antisocial behaviour in Herne Bay. I can't name the pub, but you might be able to guess it. There was a pub landlady that's been linked to ongoing theft of motor vehicles and drug use through their children. As a consequence of interventions that we put into place, the brewery has actually terminated her licence and she's being evicted, which again is really positive work, because that will have a substantial reduction in crime and ASB on the coast. And then obviously we are putting in Section 34 dispersal orders pretty much on a weekly basis at the moment, to try and combat and disrupt the antisocial behaviour over onto the coastal towns. Right, you probably can't read that, to be fair, it's really small, isn't it? What you've got there is expected involvement in crime. This is the Herne Bay Youth Hub that we set up, as I alluded to earlier on. So for argument's sake, I think I'll take the top one there, Lacey. So 142 days before the Youth Hub, they were involved in 21 offences. During the Youth Hub work that we did, they're only involved in 7. And then after, that's gone back up to 17. So that was the one exception to it. Whereas you look at some of the others there, their active involvement in crime was 4 before, during it was 3, and then after 0. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 people there that have almost scored 0 in terms of their offending afterwards, which is, you know, a really good indicator of how successful some of it was. We're not going to be able to save all of them, but we can certainly do a lot of work in relation to trying to prevent the majority. We've also done a lot of work with the CAP, which is the alcohol project, again over onto the coastal towns, where we've had licensing and trading standards, visiting shops to make sure that they're targeting the underage sales. We do have test purchases going in to try and obviously combat that. And we've done a lot of work as well around the vape shops and some of the organised criminality that goes on as a result of the vape shops and barbers and other premises that you'll see on the high streets. Again, I can't really go into too much detail about that because it is ongoing and it is organised criminality. So this one, very quickly, is the knife crime, the Kent Knife Crime Concentration Fund. So the government have given us a lofty ambition, really, or a target, if you like, to reduce knife crime by 25% over the next 2 years. Canterbury has had a zone identified. It's a very, very small defined geographical area. It's essentially Dane John Gardens going into the bus station, McDonald's, and then across into Tokyo Tea Rooms, I think it is. When you look at the data for that, you need to understand the context. So yes, it looks bad that we've got a knife crime concentration zone because everyone would naturally assume we've got a knife crime problem. That was 12 offences in 12 months that involved a knife. That's how they defined it. So we've got 12 offences that took place in 12 months, which is why we've got a crime. The difficulty for that is that the 12 months they looked at was the 12 months when Dane John Gardens was shut. So the data isn't necessarily accurate and it's going to be skewed. But we've got to reduce that by 25% in 2 years, which means we've got to stop 4 offences. It's going to be challenging for us to be able to do that. But what the government have done is they've set aside a pot of money to look at problem solving. in the longer term, as well as the hotspot patrolling and what that looks like moving forward. So that's only just come out. We have got plans in place, but again, it's a longer term project and problem solving that we need to work towards. Was that you?
Thank you. So I just would like to highlight how we worked the workshops at this point. So as you can see so far, we are a statutory function. We have to work with all partners to reduce crime and antisocial behaviour. We have to create a document that involves everybody's data to make sure we understand what the picture is that we are to deal with, which informs our priorities. Now, the last part of that jigsaw is that we feed that back to all partners. So making sure that everyone knows of everyone else's data and has the opportunity to feed in and collectively create those actions that we all sign up to dealing with for the next 3 years. So these were the 2 questions that were put to partners during that conference and workshop opportunity. And these were the questions that were asked at the counsellor and community leader one. And ultimately what that allowed us to do was to collate at each table during those 2 conferences a community safety action plan. So we pulled everyone's ideas, recommendations and offerings into one document, and that is what we will be working to for the next 3 years based around those themes and recommendations that Paul mentioned a little earlier in the presentation. So here are just a few of those examples from those actions that are now within the plan and we are delivering at as we speak. So Paul did mention around Opshanti, that's the licensing and taxis operation, which was shown to be very successful at the tail end of last year. So we've continued that for this year. Licensing and vape shops, again, that was one that you've mentioned, Paul. Vapes are something of very much of a trend, but also a danger to young people in terms of health. So something that's really important for us to ensure that they're aware of the consequences of and make sure that those selling them are legitimate in terms of the products. Healthy relationships and inputs in schools. It's really important that these things don't impact from a very young age. This is where culture sets in, and so the earlier we can get in there, the better. So that's something that a collaboration of different partners were keen to work on. Perceptions, that's a really big one for us this year. Ultimately, we know, as we said a little earlier on that summary of crime, the overview of crime, that the majority of things have gone down, but the perception of that don't seem to align. So we want to make sure that there are opportunities where we have face-to-face engagement so that we can capture and understand where those fears come from and hope to negate some of those falsities, to reassure that we are listening. A bit of a "you said we did" campaign this year, so we're going to be listening in those hotspot areas to the main concerns and see if we can specifically tackle those. That can be through letter dropping and encouraging reporting, because it may be that we're not getting those reports as well. So there's a whole campaign of communication that will be taking place over these 3 years, and they will cover national campaigns like Antisocial Behaviour Week, Domestic Abuse Week, all of the bigger sort of national ones, but also a very tailored, localised one to each of our areas within our district. Drug use and data sharing and those pathways for support, something that, again, the drug use continues to change. And so we have to, as well, with our support services and our awareness and sharing that with partners. So again, something very crucial there. Using what we have available to us. You'll see there about improved conditions on injunctions, including possession of property. It's about using each agency's tools collectively to have the wider and longer impact. Often when we do an operation, I think there was one that caught social media just this last week, from the end of last week in the city. Immigration, environmental health, police, community safety. We will go in on the back of each other's powers to ensure that we can have access to impacting what we are aware of is a concern. So it's not just about working in silo. We are making sure that there is every opportunity to strengthen our cases and our possibilities. Strengthening relationships with counsellors and police. I'm sure that you're already keen to see that one. It's one that we're all keen for, and we all want to make sure that we have the best opportunities available to us. I appreciate that can't be direct mobile numbers because officers have shift working patterns and can be called away for particular cases and incidents at any particular time, and we want to make sure that those pathways are smooth. So we will cover some communication channels just after this, which is the start of strengthening that. And that highlights, again, just the encouragement of reporting. We want to build confidence that it's not just a filed case, it's not an ignored case. They are things that we absolutely want to hear twice, 3 times over than not at all. So we're going to continue in building that trust basis. And of course, diversionary activities, it's something that quite clearly has been evidenced in just one of those small projects that Paul went into detail on earlier. So we need to make sure we've got them in the right places. And again, I'm going to cover one of those opportunities in a little more detail. Now, so funding is our pivotal point for a lot of these actions. The funding comes from all different partner agencies by match funding, offering resource, offering space. The Police Crime Commissioner does give us, or has given us this year, £36,000 as a partnership to assist us in delivering our action plan. And a number of those that have been approved to support those actions this year so far are youth workers. So we have two members of staff, but one full-time, one part-time. And they can be placed in our specific hotspot location. So we have full control over where they need to be and where they can go and the kind of activity that they are delivering for us, making sure we have really measurable outcomes coming back on that. We've got a continuation of the Connect and Thrive project, which is more the well-being side, determining, if it has... If the issues that are causing the young person to have some volatile behaviour, it may be because there is some domestic abuse at home. It could be that there has been some grief and loss of a parent. There are many reasons behind the reasons for this behaviour. So that service is very much about delving into the causes to try and help them to self-regulate and avoid that those poor choices going forward. Communication plan. So as I mentioned earlier, that's something we're going to really focus on this year. So they have funded elements of that to make sure we can print, we can hire spaces, and that we can be everywhere we need to be, getting those messages across to everyone. CCTV placement. As you know, we have a small number of mobile CCTV cameras. They cost us to be placed and they cost us to take down. So that is something that the Police Crime Commissioner has funded for us for this year period. And lastly, a taxi driver handbook and training programme, and this covers a multitude of topic areas which are key for us, from zero tolerance around sexual unwanted attention to concern around packages that they may have been asked to deliver, who to call during what types of scenarios. So it's as much about their safety as well as customers and being sort of that wider eyes and ears for the community. So there's a whole training package and handbook that will be created for them this year. So there's just an example of some of the projects that are being used from that pot of funding. Paul will give you some update on these other two.
Yes, obviously I've alluded to it already, but the DEP has given us £81,000 for the summer coastal uplift. That has been split, and that's not just solely for Canterbury. It obviously covers Thanet as well, because they have a lot of issues with the beaches and everything else. So Thanet have actually taken the lion's share of it. So they've taken 50,000. Canterbury has taken 30,000. But we have also been successful in securing additional sum of money, which I won't divulge here. But that's in relation to the Jewish summer retreat, where we have 2,000 Orthodox Jews that come down and stay at the university. Because of the recent terror attacks and the threat level rising, we have got additional money for that, which has allowed us again to uplift officers in and around that 2-week period. So it shouldn't have an impact on our daily business and the service we deliver to the community locally. But that's pretty much where we are with the funding at the moment. We do try and do a lot of it on no cost or zero cost with the cancellation of rest days, etc., especially when we know there is peak period coming for demand. Yes, so National Intelligence Model. Again, I apologise, some of you probably can't read that on the screen, it's quite small. So the National Intelligence Model has been reinvigorated into Kent Police. It was actually first brought in back in 2000, I think, by the former Chief Constable, who was the dad of the current DEP, Mr. Ayling. What the National Intelligence Model is basically well, it's a model, it says on the tin. where the information comes in, and it's how we then assess or how we then use that intelligence and how we use it. And I suppose the best way to describe it is to give you an example. So where an officer is walking down the street and he might see Joe Bloggs wearing an orange jacket, he might think nothing of it because the person's doing nothing wrong at that moment in time. The officer will submit a 5x5, which is an intelligence report. That will go into the system. We may then get that night CCTV or a burglary that occurs where somebody has been seen wearing an orange jacket. The analysts will look at that intelligence, they will they will match it up, join the dots, and then all of a sudden we've now got information or intelligence to suggest that person has committed that burglary. The same goes, and then it's how we then put in place that intelligence. It's not rocket science. It is quite simple. It is quite straightforward, but it only works if we have the intelligence coming in. And sometimes that intelligence can be really inconsequential. It could be nothing. But when you put that little piece of intelligence into the bigger puzzle or the bigger picture, you actually start to create that picture and you understand what's happening within our societies and within our communities. So I suppose for me, this is around, again, it feeds into organised crime. It goes back into the vape shops. It goes back into one particular OCG that we've got at the moment in Canterbury is around brothels and prostitution and modern day slavery. I'm really proud of the fact that actually Canterbury has got the highest number of disruptions and targeted activity in relation to that organised crime. But we can only do that based on the intelligence coming in, and that comes from the people in the street who are reporting susps males going to and from that address at weird times of the day or night, or 10 or 15 blokes going to it. They're reporting those concerns to us, and it allows us to identify those addresses that we can then obviously work around and target and then disrupt that organised crime. So I suppose the plea for me is around going back into your communities and extolling the benefits of, if you see something and you think it might be of interest, report it, get that into the police, phone it in, or, which Lacey will come on to in a minute, through the My Community Voice, which is a two-way platform that you've got of contacting the officers and the local beat officers to actually tell them that there's something going on that you're not quite sure about. And we can then take that piece of information and build it and use it into something tangible. And that's where the National Intelligence Model comes in. It's a circle, it feeds in, so the information comes in, we'll analyse it, we'll task it out, we'll do the activity, we'll review what happened, and then we'll go again. And it's a really good way of being proactive, but being targeted with the limited resources we've got. I've probably covered all of that. Yeah, we'll keep that sweet. And then obviously the My Community Voice part, which is really key for us. The force have undertaken this. It is the best way to contact your local beat officers. We are putting out more and more things on it in relation to, but bespoke to your roads or your neighbourhoods where you live, to try and make sure that we're updating you with you said this is what we've done, just to reassure you that we are taking action on the things that you've raised. So again, my plea is to get your local people to actually sign up to this and use it, because it is a useful tool.
Thank you. And our last plea is just to report things in the right places at the right times. So here you'll see a pamphlet that we share in key areas where we have under-reporting, but we are aware that there are issues. So you'll note the usual 999 101 and the council's number there, as well as Crime Stoppers. But online we have fly tipping specific links, graffiti specific links. So we would just encourage anyone, when you're aware, one of your constituents shares with you the information, to please get them to report those through those specific links, because it gets the information to the right team faster. And as you can see from those results from our cases earlier in the presentation, we have some really good outcomes with them. So the faster the information gets to the right place, the better for us. So please do encourage that reporting. And ultimately, just a huge thank you to everybody that has been involved in all of the project work, all of the information sharing, any opportunities for funding over these past 3 years. It has been a fabulously successful 3-year project in terms of the plan, and we look forward to this current 3-year plan offering something, if not more, of the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lacey and Paul, for that very detailed presentation and what you've been up to and what the forward plan is. Councillor Nolan, would you like to say anything?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say that it is a partnership and we are very grateful that we have other organisations, obviously the police and the council, but we also have the universities, organisations like Rising Sun, and of course BID that form the partnership. I think it's really important to say that reporting is so important because the police are data driven, the council is data driven, and to echo the idea that if you get your residents to report it, some of you who might follow me on Facebook will know that I'm a bit of a demon. When someone sort of says, oh, look at the rubbish in the street, I'm straight in there, have you reported it? And I do the link so that they can report it. And just to give some praise to the team, because I think they work extremely well. I went into the council offices. I happened to be in the town. I saw some racist graffiti on King Ethelbert, of all people. So I went in to report it, and they said to me, we've already sent the team out. We already know it's there. So they do act very, very quickly on it. What you will hear from residents is, I don't bother to report it because the police don't do anything. That's not true. Can you also please encourage them to, look at their doorbells? If the piece of fly tipping has happened in their street, a lot of people have got the Ring doorbells, and we've had a fairly recent case where somebody on their Ring doorbell saw that a chap had turned up in a hire van actually and done some quite drastic fly tipping, and that was a very successful prosecution. So the council, the police do act on fly tipping, and I know that they work very hard on that, and they've got, as Lacey was saying, lots of successes. But I just wanted to say that it's widened now with the project, which is in Herne Bay. If there was more money, we'd do more of it, which is great. But as Paul has alluded, the Deputy Chief Constable has been giving some money from his budget so that that kind of work can happen. And I think it's an absolute accolade for Canterbury that some of the things that start in Canterbury then get rolled out to the rest of the county, which I think is really important. But if you've got any questions, Chair, ask them. I might not know the answers. The officers may well know the answers, but I shall certainly write them down and research them and come back in Cabinet when this gets reported. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Nolan. So, yeah, open it up for debate. Now, we all know that it's incredibly hot this evening. So if we want to aim to get out of here quite early-ish, unlike sometimes this committee goes on till quite late at night, doesn't it? Yeah. So can we, just keep it quite tight this evening? And if I push you along, which I don't normally, but if I do, don't take it personally. It's just because we all want to get into a cooler environment. So thank you all very much. Councillor Paget first, and then I think it was Watkins and Campbell, and yes, everybody over here. Right, so everyone after that. Okay, right, fine.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. A key element of the plan, as been referenced this evening, is obviously around safety of children and young people and reducing harm in the community has been pulled out as key themes. Across the district, as has been mentioned, including in my own ward of Herne and Broomfield, challenges with dangerous parking around schools and the knock-on effects of some of the behaviour that results from that has often had severe negative impacts for children and residents living in the community as well. I welcome some of the collaborative action that has taken place to arrange that targeted enforcement. Something that I picked up on from the figures in the report is that there seems to be a bit of a discrepancy between sort of the amount that the places that we've been out to and the number of penalty notices issued. So I wondered if you could say a little bit more about that in terms of why that is potentially fairly low in comparison to the number of schools that we've been out to. It just seems that it's not scratching the surface, and we're not really seeing the improvements on the ground in terms of what's actually happening outside schools. These issues are ingrained in, school drop-offs and pickups for many years, and they're just becoming an incredibly dangerous situation, to the point where in some streets, for example, in Streetfield in Herne, if a fire engine or an ambulance needed to get round there, that poses a huge danger, because they simply would not be able to during that time. And of course, there's the issue of dangerous parking and the impact that has on children and young people as they're exiting school. So I just wanted to highlight that, and I know it's something that you're all very much aware of. But if you can say any more about those penalty notices being issued, and also sort of the plans going forward in terms of being able to take that forward and have a more sustained impact outside schools. Thank you.
Councillor Paget. Councillor Nolan.
Yeah, for the actual sort of ratio, I'll refer to Lacey. But it has been quite successful. Please invite me to the school. I turn up very early in the morning to sort of see what goes on. It doesn't matter whether it's icy or raining or whatever, because one of the things that I have discovered by visiting the schools where there is problems, sometimes it's a question of you can iron out things, and sometimes it's a question of other things that can happen. But certainly, please invite me to with you and with the head of the school, and I will turn up. I've got quite good now at sort of saying, well, what we could do is extend that bit of double lines, yellow lines or whatever. I haven't got a I haven't got a magic wand, but I certainly will look at it. And the other thing that I've worked with Councillor Mackenzie on some issues is actually sort of having a fresh approach to things and that. So please invite me. But I'll pass over to Lacey for the ratio between the fixed penalty notices and that.
Thank you, Connie and Grace. So yes, completely agree. And on paper, it does look to be quite a differentiation in terms of that ratio. The uniform is quite a powerful tool. As soon as individuals see the uniform, they're suddenly speeding back to the cars and driving away. We do have a penalty charge called a Reg 10 in terms of the officer's inner language, which can be issued to a vehicle that does drive off. All we need to have done is captured the registration plate and an awareness of the offence, the contravention at the time. But ultimately, a good number are in their vehicles or return to their vehicles quite quickly and remove those. So that is part of why those numbers aren't an exact high match to the number of visits. The second is actually because we have engaging conversations with those individuals. So sometimes we will issue a warning notice. We also add in elements around air quality. So if they are sitting with the engine idle, appreciate it's very hot, and quite likely those who want to sit with their aircon on today, or in the winter with their heating on, there might be a newborn baby in the back of the car. There will be scenarios where the officers try to use common sense and a little bit of sort of integrity with those interactions. I'm not saying that they are everyday occurrences, but there is a consideration with the enforcement as well. Enforcement should be the last resort. And so within the 4 E's, as is guidance with enforcement, we engage, we educate, and we enforce. So yes, penalty charge notices are absolutely an element of that, and a considerable number of them still. But warnings also, education also, appreciating a situation for maybe what it may be at the time. The other side is the Think Park Smart Toolkit. So that's available online. We've delivered it out to all schools. It's in support with Kent County Council as well. There are abled signs, banners, competitions where the children can design things and they get given outside of school. This is all helpful and useful to the school to support, because ultimately it's part of their responsibility as well. So we did relaunch that to remind everybody, because again, staffing changes, it slips off the radar, that is a tool that is something that they can tap into. And we did have some feedback and interaction off the back of the relaunch. And lastly, actually, as Connie had mentioned, change to restrictions. as infrastructures change, as the size of cars change, as road networks change, so must the restrictions as well. So it may be that sometimes we have to review what those restrictions look like in a locality, and the officers will do that and feed that back as well during those operations. But please, if you have ideas on how those restrictions can change, they can be put in and worked through the cycle as well for consultation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lacey. Councillor Watkins.
Thanks, Chair. And I'll just have the one contribution tonight. You'll be glad to hear. Thanks to the police and community safety team there. Lots of great case studies, actually, of successes you've had in the past year. And I must say, speaking about Herne Bay, I really want to thank the police for making good their commitment to increase the permanent police presence out of the police station. That's made a huge difference. And, you know, you've given some great examples of that. The partnership working you're doing with the youth hub, where you've actually taken young people out of crime, hopefully permanently, and even if for a few years, that will be offering much relief to the residents of the town. And you know, getting those catapults seized from people who were targeting wildlife. So just a couple of great examples. So yeah, thank you for that. It makes a real difference, and you see that every week working as a counsellor in terms of what people are talking to you about. They're not talking about antisocial behaviour nearly as much as they were this time last year. So I just had 2 points I wanted to focus on: environmental crime. And just to give you an example of how damaging this kind of crime is, I've had a number of Green Hill residents contact me about a month ago after a large amount of building waste was dumped on the Traveller site on the north side of the Old Thanet Way, and then set fire to, resulting in a huge toxic plume of black smoke hanging over that site for a couple of days. Yeah, it's bad for people's health. I had one resident told me they had to move out of their home for a couple of days because they got respiratory issues and, you know, potentially deadly for someone like that. It's bad for nature, and that's bad for our economic prospects. You know, it just looks terrible for the town, as all forms of environmental crime do. I'm sure everyone would agree. You've had 9 prosecutions. That sounds quite good, because I'm aware that they're quite resource intensive, those prosecutions. But I would just say generally throughout this report, it'd be good to get a bit more historic data to give some context. You know, so how many prosecutions did we get in the previous year and the year before that? I think would be really useful in these priority areas. So a bit of structured data would be great. And then finally, it's really interesting reading about the operation you did against commercial waste vehicles. And if I've understood this correctly, you stopped 60 vehicles, and of those, you took enforcement action against 28. So almost half of all those vehicles were committing some sort of crime, whether that be to do with paperwork or actually in the act of transporting waste that they're not allowed to, possibly in the act of dumping it somewhere. I mean, is that right? That it's from a random sample, we found half of those operators were operating outside the law. And if so, I mean, it just makes me think we should do more of this, because we should be hoping that we could do that and find like less than 10% of people are breaking the law. So that was interesting and shows the value of doing it when you catch that many people. So yeah, thanks again, and welcome your feedback.
Thank you. Lacey.
Indeed. It's not just in terms of the waste carrying as well, it's actually roadworthy vehicles. So if they've got bald tyres, they haven't got a driving licence, you know, there are all elements of enforcement gathered within that 28. But yes, 28 enforcement actions, and potentially, you know, 3 or 4 of those may have been one driver. So there are, you know, data is a wonderful thing, isn't it, without the fuller context, but wouldn't want to bore you or have a very long report to share with you all. So happy to answer those questions on the detail. But yes, 28 enforcement actions and historic data to compare to, I've made a note for next time.
Thank you. And Councillor Nolan, do you want to say anything about fly tipping at all? And what... Yeah, and the focus on that, please, because I think it's something that really is affecting all of us.
Fly tipping is a scourge. I really feel for the farmer that goes to feed their animals and find that some low down scum has tipped some waste on the gateway because we can't do anything about it. It's his land or her land. And so I really do feel from the farmer from that point of view. I have witnessed driving along a country road in one way, dropping my son off for an activity. By the time I was driving back, somebody had tipped some rubbish in the middle of the road. So it happens all the time. It isn't just in the towns, it goes on in the countryside, and I do really feel for that. It goes back to the point that I was making really about a lot of people have Ring doorbells now, and we are the team is really good at successful prosecutions. I do feel for the team because one of the things they have to do, just to be a bit sort of explicit about it, is if there's a pile of rubbish, it's on with the sort of latex gloves and going through to look for evidence and that, and that's not a nice job to do at all. But fly tipping is a scourge, and I think that we ought to be very aware of the fact that the team are working flat out and have very successful prosecutions. But we need people to tell us, basically. I know there was a particular case that you reported, and it was awful because it wasn't actually on land that we could do something about it. It was actually on the farmer's land, and that's why I started with the fact I do feel for the farmers very much on that point. But there's also I call it middle class fly tipping. You've probably seen it where somebody thinks, oh, I'll put that settee out and I'll put on Facebook, if anybody wants it, and that's not really good enough. People should if they want to say, I've got a settee I'm getting rid of, put it on Facebook before you put it out in the street, for the cat to wee on and all the rest of it. I mean, it's I call it middle class fly tipping. We really have to get into people's heads that it's not acceptable to use the streets as their dumping ground. It's just that there are repeat offenders and we've got to crack down on them.
Thank you. I think one of the issues is the reporting system as well. It can be quite unclear because someone reports something and then it disappears, but it hasn't been removed. And then it gets reported and then it disappears and it hasn't been removed. And it could just do with some I think Councillor Forrester might speak more on this, but it could do with some greater clarification, I think, of when it was first reported, why it disappeared off the site, just to give more clarity as well.
Hey, I see where you're coming from. So if you report fly tipping and it gets removed, you get told it's been removed. But if there's a reason why it shouldn't get removed, because you don't get told, I do accept that.
That's my particular issue. I'll come to you in a minute, Councillor Forrester. But Councillor Campbell is first.
I'll try and be quick. On that last part, I didn't realise that, Connie, so I'll be interested to hear the explanation for that. I assume it just got forgotten about, but about the fly tipping. A couple of questions, and I will be quick. First one is about drugs. It doesn't really get a mention as a specific subject in the report, and I guess it's wrapped up under the serious organised crime. And it comes up quite a lot with the ward PCs as an issue, a crime within itself, also driving a lot of other crime. And I'm just wondering what actions are in there to perhaps disrupt county lines, that type of thing. And when I say disrupt rather than displace, because I know that it's a big problem in Kent where you just move the problem somewhere else. So I'd like to get an idea of what is being covered by that. And the other one's a bit of a geeky question, I'm afraid. There was a great slide you put up there where the year-on-year figures, last year to this year, have all come down. They're all moving in the right direction. But I'd like to know, what's the sort of 5-year prognosis? Is it a 1-year recovery, just getting us to where we were 5 years ago, or is it a constant trend? And also, what does sort of good look like? For example, how do we compare? I mean, Councillor Nolan did allude to it. How do we compare to other parts of Kent? Are we the gold standard in terms of our crime statistics against other areas, or are we fighting to catch up? Just a bit of context about where we sit in that, if that's possible, please.
Paul.
Thank you. Weirdly enough, I've just spent 2 days on a course around statistics, crime performance and management by a chap called Malcolm Hibbard, who has worked for national policing for years. And all of the points that you've just raised were covered off in this course, because the way we look at data and the way we compare data at the moment is actually wrong. And what he's trying to advocate for is exactly what you said. A bit like the stock market, you zoom out on stock market to see a trend over 10 years. You don't just look at a day. And that's something that our data analysts don't do. And it's something that we do need to, they can do it. It's just really time intensive. And our analysts are looking at all of the other emerging crime trends. They're looking at the theft from motor vehicles. They're looking at the burglaries and trying to plot them and looking at the temporal times as to when they've occurred. So they're busy doing all of the day-to-day stuff, not actually looking at those longer term themes and trends. And it's really important that we do, because as you rightly pointed out, what does good actually look like? And until you can compare that data, and data can be interpreted in a variety of different ways, as we all know. So, but you need a standardized format as to what that looks like. So at the moment, I can't give you that specific data. It's an aspiration that I will be able to. It's when, I think, is probably the question to that. In relation to the drugs, gangs and county lines, that is definitely a massive feature of our work. It is still part of our control strategy. We do have a dedicated gangs and county lines team that deal with that side of it, and they deal with alongside my child centre policing team, who look at it more from a holistic vulnerability approach towards the children involved. But the gangs and county line teams do a lot of disruptions around the phones, who's holding which phone, because ultimately the line is the phone, it's not the person. So wherever that phone is the county line. And we then do a lot of drugs enforcement, warrants and arrests, etc. So, but in terms of data for drugs, I mean, I've got it in front of me here now. So for the rolling year, if you like, drug offences are down 2.2%. Now, some would say that's really good. Others would say that's really bad, because drug offences are found by the police. So if we're out being proactive and we stop searching people and we're acting upon the intelligence and the information that we've got coming in through the NIM, through the National Intelligence Model, I would expect our drug possessions to go up, because it means we're being proactive. So the fact it's gone down by 2.2%, that's 15 offences, just to give you the actual number. That's not actually a significant drop. So it's not something for me to sit here and look at the data and start to worry about. If that dropped year on year on year over the course of 10 years, I would want to know why, because I'd be looking at, well, what are my officers doing? Where's the proactivity? Why aren't they getting their hands in people's pockets? And why aren't they stop searching people? So, you know, things like that. So possession of weapons, for example, again, they're found by the police. They don't get reported to us. Someone doesn't phone up and say, I've got a knife. They're only found by us turning people over and getting our hands in their pockets. So possession of weapon offences, for argument's sake, is down 5.1%. That's a reduction of 9. So again, data has its value, but you always have to understand the context behind that data. Because again, there might be legislative changes. You've got COVID as part of that. If you go back 10 years, there'll be a massive drop off in the number of stop searches and the number of drug offences, because no one left their house for 9 months. So again, that would distort the data. So it's a good question, but it's not an answer that I can give very easily, if that makes sense.
Thank you for that.
All right.
Yeah, Marie.
Thank you, Chair. And just to add as well on the subject of cuckooing, it's something that Canterbury realised a couple of years ago. This was an emerging threat to our communities. And I led with police colleagues on a multi-agency guide to cuckooing, dealing with cuckooing. And that's been adopted at a Kent level by Kent County Council and other partners. So that's a sign of good practice that we've rolled out and shared with others. And I think that it comes back to Lacey's earlier point about community awareness, reporting things that don't look right, and then using that data and intelligence to build up a picture. So all of our housing staff know about cuckooing. They all know about the signs and what to look out for. and the approach that we've taken is now different. It's not about treating that person who's been cuckooed as part of the problem. It's about looking at them as being a victim and what support can be put in place and how they can be supported. And as part of the work of the Community Safety Partnership, there is a vulnerability panel that sits and looks at cases like this and takes that multi-agency approach. So it's rolling out that approach across lots of different issues within our communities.
Thank you very much, Marie. Councillor Forrester.
Thank you, Chair. I want to start by saying the community voice has been used really effectively within my ward in St Stephen's, and a particular thanks from myself and residents to PC Gary Sorrell, who's really upped the usage of it, and people have commented, not only is it really nice to hear what he's doing, but he's also quite funny in how he reports it. He did a recent seizure and asked if anyone recognised the seizure, if they could pop down to the station, he'd have a word with them. I'm not sure if anyone did, but then to move on, I wanted to echo Councillor Paget's point about parking outside schools. As she said, it's a problem across the district. And as it was mentioned, parents parking do react to people in uniform and react very quickly, but it's often the next day when the officers in uniform aren't there and people go back to their old behaviours. I'm not quite sure how we close that cycle, but I think that's the problem, not the effectiveness of the officers, their presence, or the enforcement undertaken. On page 15 of the report, the first bullet point, when we're talking about modern slavery and exploitation, said 80% of activity took place within city locations, and the remaining 20% was coastal areas. And obviously, that takes us to 100%, which made me slightly concerned what was happening in rural areas, because it appeared nothing. So I just wondered if my maths was wrong, or if the report was wrong, or if there's a reason for that. And then lastly, it wouldn't be a contribution without talking about fly tipping. So to come back to what our chair was speaking about, my residents are keen to report fly tipping and do so. Their concern, I think, as the chair mentioned, is what happens once they report it. And these issues are twofold. There's the issue of it on fly tipping on private land. I'm in a city ward, so it's not a farmer's land, it's the garages at the back of their house, or that bit of land that's privately owned at the end of the estate. And they get a notification that says, we, the council, can't act on this because it's private land. But of course, that doesn't resolve the problem of whatever it is that's tipped at the end of their garden. And indeed, it being there often encourages more fly tipping in the same location, and the cycle goes on. But those are the good cases. More often, people are dismayed and contact me when they've contacted the council about fly tipping and it hasn't been removed. And I don't think those are cases where we can't, but there have been instances where things have been moved. So a sofa has been fly tipped in a park, or a trolley has been fly tipped in a park. It's been reported in one corner of the park, and then, as things with wheels do, they move to another corner of the park. And residents then get notified that the item has been removed, whereas you can see it has not. So it doesn't say the council have removed it, it says the item has been removed, but it's not by our officers, it's by whoever has decided the sofa should be on the other side of the park for that day. And then there is no mechanism on that email notification for the resident to follow that up and say, actually, I think you're mistaken. The resident then has to report the item entirely again from the start. It counts as another fly tip for our records, and there's no guarantee that the same thing won't happen again and the trolley won't be moved further through the park. And so I just wondered if there's any way we can address that, either through like a click button on the email, or I don't know how hard that is. My tech skills aren't up to it, but thank you.
Paul, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, I'm grateful for the feedback in relation to Gary and the use of the My Community Voice. That's exactly what you should be doing and what we're actively encouraging all of our beat officers to do. And if you're not getting that level of service and you're not getting the updates, then please let us know and we will speak to the officer and make sure that's being done. In relation to the statistics, 80% city, that's probably the way we've reported it. I would suggest that it's city side, not necessarily within the city walls, and then obviously the coastal side. But what we have to understand is that most of our modern day slavery and human trafficking offences are centred around, as I alluded to earlier on, the brothels that we have that pop up via the Airbnbs or the letting agents, where a premises is letted out for a month and they then ship a couple of Brazilian females in. We do a safe and well visit on those females and then find that they're the subject of modern day slavery. Or it might be linked into the nighttime economy where we've got restaurants, bars, and the vape shops that are employing people and not paying them, etc. So whilst it is city side, it does cover the rural parts of the city as well, if that makes sense.
And then Lacey, or who on the webs on the reporting, yeah.
Yes, thank you. And these are elements that we work with Can & Co, our contractor, on in terms of improving the systems that we have. So I can understand and appreciate the frustrations with the cycle of the reporting and the moving of items. It's certainly something that the team have also noted. A case where officers have come across a fly tip that's been reported that is on private land, they will still investigate. They will still get the rubber gloves on, as Connie said, and delve through the waste to see if we can identify who and where that's come from. They will still ask for doorbell footage, look at CCTV footage as well, if we can gather any evidence from that to take enforcement action. So some of those cases that we have prosecuted have actually been private land. So just to offer that reassurance. But I appreciate the element of it not having been removed, and the broken window theory in terms of others then adding to it is certainly something of a frustration, and one that we do appreciate. We try and work with landowners to support them in it. It's not something that we as a local authority have a budget to do and help with at this time, but certainly something that we do sympathise with. The feedback specifically, though, from officers, once they have dealt with a private land case and appreciate that it's been noted that it cannot be removed, so the case gets closed, sometimes those do then end up being moved onto public land where it then can be removed. So sometimes, again, we do have a duplication of those reports, which officers would turn up to again to go and investigate and note that it was an investigation that they already have live, and in which case would instruct Can & Co to remove that waste. So we do find it kind of works both ways in terms of where that waste can move to and how it ends up being removed. But certainly systems and improvements, the communication elements of it, are something that myself and the managers in Can & Co are constantly trying to work on and develop however we possibly can. We're not the tech experts, but we certainly know where the gaps are, and they are on a wish list to improve at the earliest opportunity.
Perhaps it's just something that could be noted then, that the system of outcomes could be improved, and it's probably quite simple to do as well. Well, it depends on the techie people, doesn't it? But yeah, hopefully. Right, I will come to all of you because I know you all want to speak, so don't worry, you're on the list. But Councillor Prentice first, and then I'm coming to Councillor Soul and Councillor Turnbull, and then I will come back round in order.
Thank you, Chair. And just to pick up on Councillor Paget's and Councillor Forrester's points, and it's probably more of a comment or a plea, but with regards to school parking and antisocial parking around schools and illegal parking around schools, I think we have seen examples of where interventions and work with KCC has encouraged better parking behaviour and more sustainable journeys to schools. And I would just like to see a little bit more sort of overt recognition and overt links up with our transport team, because obviously we do have a transport strategy. We do have targets that we want to meet in terms of getting more kids, walking and cycling to school where possible. I know that's not always possible, and I know that many parents will be time pressed, but
there are maybe things we can do without even needing to do enforcement, but putting the carrot rather than the stick in place so that we can encourage more sustainable transport habits. And I'm sure it's easier said than done, and there's lots of work that would be needed with schools and with parents to make it happen. But I think that's an area we could do a little bit more on. The other point is around the PR of good outcomes. And one thing that residents always pick up on is that when we have had really good outcomes and people have been prosecuted, I think it goes down really, really well. And I've said it in this particular meeting before, I'm sure. Let's just keep doing that, because you mentioned rightly a communications plan, and I know the resourcing a communications plan means spending money on things like posters and websites and flyers and so on. But sometimes just a well-targeted press release with good data and telling a good story about how we've managed to fix a problem can go a long way. So I wouldn't underestimate the just getting stuff out there in the local media is really, really important as part of an overall communication strategy. A point about waste carriers, and I think, this probably feeds into a point about fly tipping. Rather than go on and on about fly tipping, as I'm sure we all could all night, because it's just one of those things that's always going to be discussed. I've often thought whether we could be more proactive as a council, mindful that there are, in terms of waste carriers, there are obviously a number of private businesses that will do that, and they're licensed, and they are bona fide waste carriers, and they do what they say they'll do, and they do it legally. But I've always wondered whether there's more that we can do, bearing in mind the pressures that people have on cost of living, and sometimes. If people know that there may be assistance from the council, is that something that's worth looking into more? Possibly not, but there are areas where it feels like it's a lot harder for people to do the right thing. There's other areas where you don't need to worry about it because people are doing the right thing already. But there's definitely problem areas where I think some areas would benefit from an easier to access service that they don't have to pay the earth for. And final point really is about delivery riders on the high street. And I note that the various operations either cover e-bike use or e-scooter use, but we do have a number of instances with mopeds picking up from restaurants in the city centre. And I have spoken sort of briefly to Councillor Nolan about this, and I'm wondering particularly, Paul, if you've got a view on what more we could do to whether there is either enforcement we can do or changes to things like traffic regulation orders to actually improve the environment of the high street in the evening, where we've just got fleets of mopeds, and there are people who live centrally as well as use it for leisure. So I'm not anti-delivery rider, but all I'm saying, because it's a fact of life that we have lots of delivery companies now and fast food takeaways, but I'm just interested in maybe more generally your views on enforcement of some of that more irresponsible behaviour. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, do you?
Thank you. Yeah, if I touch briefly on the fly tipping issue, and I think this is where the community safety partnership, and whilst it may not fit truly within that, I think you're right, because there does need to be a wider look around policy and what the council might be able to do in terms of, I know in Swale it's 30 quid to get you a bulky item, that's 30 quid per item. So if you've got 2 or 3 items, you're suddenly got a lot of money. And I think that comes back down to, again, central government and policy decisions made by councils and partners, not necessarily a policing matter, but it's something that you could look at more wider as a council to say, well, what can we actually do to stop the fly tipping at the root cause? We can do the enforcement, but can we actually stop the fly tipping taking place in the first place? So I think that's a good point, and something maybe for wider conversation amongst yourselves. In relation to the delivery riders, or I say Deliveroo, there's many more than one company, I should point out. we do enforcement activity. We do issue lots of fixed penalty notices. We do seize bikes. We do certainly seize the e-scooters. The difficulty for us is it comes back down to threat, risk and harm. So we will prioritise our resources based on the threat, risk and harm. And whilst there might be the odd occasion where somebody might get knocked over by an e-scooter, they're actually thankfully quite rare. We will put our resources into dealing with the nighttime economy, the serious violence where people actually get physically injured, the modern day slavery and things like that. So we do undertake the operations, but they're not as often as I probably would like, and they are sporadic in their detail. Again, this would be something that potentially the community safety partnership could look at from a wider perspective as opposed to just enforcement, and look at, as you alluded to, the traffic regulation orders. I'm thinking off the top of my head whether PSPOs might be a factor, or whether we actually change certain timings that bikes are allowed into certain roads. There's lots of things that could actually be done to prevent it as opposed to just constantly enforcing it. And that's where we need to get together and work that through.
Yeah, I think I'm happy with that response, and I think I note your priorities for the next few years as well, and your plans for the next few years, and I wouldn't expect all of those priorities to be sort of ignored or ripped up, because I recognise you do have to prioritise, and it's hard without all the funding that you would ideally like to have. But it's a broader conversation to have. So I certainly wouldn't expect you to answer on your own as our police officer, as our police representative here. But I think it's worth having a wider conversation about delivery riders and a more sort of responsible culture among the way they operate, for want of a better phrase, because I think it's something that needs to be looked at. And I'm open-minded as to what that, I'm sure we all are, as to what the potential solutions to some of the problems are. But thank you for your responses.
And Lacey, you want to?
Lacey, yeah.
Thank you. So when the new creation of the delivery riding, specifically within the city centre, we found as an emerging issue and being reported in a higher volume, we conducted a review in its entirety. So we considered the TRO and the amendments to that, the PSPO being the potential right tool for it or not, along with a multitude of other elements. So it was all a part of a review or a sort of a project to determine how we could best support the new structure that has now been created, support the new culture that is within the city centre, but also manage risk and reduce fear of that. So that was all part of it. We did also create a flyer that had a traffic light system, if you like, on it, highlighting to riders where they could go anytime, where they could go during restricted times, and where they would never be able to go because they are always restricted. So we made it really clear, so that enabled enforcement as well, because again, it should be the last resort. But we also went further than that and engaged with the delivery rider organisations and local businesses and said, if we were to put stopping points in, where would you like them? Here are some of our suggestions. And we just didn't have any uptake. There was no one willing to engage, no one willing to share the ideas to find a solution going forward. So we have tried. It's not to say we won't try again, but that was all part of the creation of the PSPO last time round, which included antisocial delivery riding within it, of which we did do and have done many operations jointly with the police and immigration as well, specifically around the delivery riders and that sort of city centre risk. So it's something we'll continue to work on. And regarding schools and working with transport, absolutely, the toolkit, the Think Part Smart toolkit, does have walking buses and all this kind of thing built into it, and we constantly try and push that. It is one of those ones that has been around since I have been here, was long before and likely will still be after, but not one that we will give up on. We will continue to try our best with that, and I'll take away the other regarding the waste and bulky things to the other departments and see what the options are.
Thank you very much, Lacey. And that's all. That will be noted in the minutes as well. So we put that through as and Councillor Nolan is noting it all down as well. I can see. So that will all go through anyway. Councillor Prentice, Councillor Sol.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to continue on the fly tipping theme, please. I've just had a quick look at our fly tipping reporting website. And one of the first things it says on there is, let us know about fly tipping on public land. It doesn't mention anywhere on there that we have a duty to investigate fly tipping on private land. And I've certainly spoken to people who don't realise that, and particularly in rural areas and farmers, they don't know that that is our role. And I think the website immediately puts people off. People need to know, and we need to get it out there. If you see fly tipping, report it. The website also shows at the moment there are 369 items on there, and I've just clicked at random at about half a dozen of those. And the oldest one I found was 18th of March and just says scheduled to be picked up. Well, fly tipping does attract more fly tipping. And if we've got items of furniture and brick rubble and whatever else lying around for 3 months not being picked up, I don't think that's good enough. And I'd be interested to see some statistics as to how long it takes for fly tipping to be collected. I think we need to do a lot better on that. And finally, on a different topic, one thing that's not been mentioned tonight, and it's not in the report at all, is fraud, and particularly online fraud. Nothing about that. I think that is a major worry to people, and particularly older people. And I'd like to see some statistics as to how we're doing in this district on fraud and what we are doing to combat it, and how many incidents there are.
Lacey, do you want to go first on?
Thank you. You make a very good point. I just quickly got our website up and I saw the first line on the page which says report fly tipping to us, but you're right, the second line is dumped illegally in a public area, not necessarily private. So there will be reason as to why the wording was done in that way, but I do take your point that it could be misleading in that we could be missing some of those fly tippings that ultimately will hold crucial information that can be attached to a more organised nature that we absolutely want to know about. So I will certainly take that one back. Thank you.
And what about or is Connie, can you answer Mike on the numbers and why it takes so long?
Mike, thank you. It's always good to have somebody with that eagle eye going in for that granular detail. I don't know why there's some fly tipping that hasn't been picked up from March, but now that is recorded, it will be looked into, and I will make sure that we come back and say why. I can only think that it's some kind of specialist. I'm making this up as I go along, but specialist stuff, because I know I've seen Kanenko go around with the the high-sided van and pick up the mattresses and chuck them in and that. So that's I will ask and I will find out, and I suspect it's because it's some special kind of waste that has to be looked at. But thank you. Yes, it's in the book. I'll look at it.
And it comes back to what I was asking about earlier, where some of those, this is the one that Councillor Nolan referred to, I had one that took 5 months. And because it was reported and then it said it was being collected and then it said it had been dealt with, but it hadn't. And that's because it couldn't be dealt with because it was on private land, but then it was on public land, and then it became very big and complicated. But if you looked on the site, it just gave misinformation. So yeah, it needs, I think the site needs a look at, really, because it's not helpful to if we can't work it out, then residents really can't work out. So yeah, I think that would be really good. And Paul, did you want to come back on fraud?
Thanks for that. Copilot is my friend because I've just researched as to why fraud. So basically, fraud isn't captured by Home Office forces recording data. So the spreadsheets I've got in front of me doesn't actually make reference to fraud at all. And the reason for that is because it's reported centrally via action fraud and report fraud, which is not directly linked to local forces. So it's then analysed by the National Fraud Intelligence Bureau, which is the City of London Police. And as a result of that, the data doesn't actually originate from the force systems. Because the Home Office crime series relies on national crime recording standards, which is applied by forces, fraud doesn't. It sits outside of that framework. and actually uses industry and third-party data feeds such as banks and UK finance, etc., to inform and actually record those statistics. So it's got different counting rules and different classifications. So it's a very polite way of me basically saying, I don't know what the statistics are for Canterbury. There probably is a way of finding that out, but it's not something that is published data by Kent Police.
Can I clarify, just for my information, do Kent Police do the investigative work on fraud in Kent, or is that dealt with nationally?
It depends on what level of fraud and what type of fraud it is. Some of it might get picked up by the National Crime Agency. Some of it will just be dealt with internally by the bank. So there'll be a crime report that's created and they'll basically file it. And then the banks will essentially just settle it and pay the person back because it was not the bank's fault that they got defrauded. But that's what the Consumer Protection Act does. And it's just not worth it because the person who's committed the fraud is in a different country outside of the UK, for example. So Kent Police do investigate frauds. But what we don't have is that published data, which I can tell you exactly what our burglary levels are, what our robbery levels are, but I can't tell you what our fraud levels are at this moment in time. But I'd be more than happy to go away and try and find out for you and then come back and tell you.
Thank you. And thank you for raising that on the fly tipping as well, Councillor Saul. Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm a councillor for Gorrel in Whitstable Town Centre. So I appreciate your update on what's happening there, and the uplift in what's happening on the coast is appreciated as well. And though obviously we still have issues as we've had recently, but it does feel like you're expecting it and you're ready. You can't obviously predict everything that's going to happen, but you've got people who will turn up pretty quickly, which is great. I think one or two people are sort of like, well, they just turn up. I think they expect the police to turn up and start, grabbing people and shoving them in cars, and of course it's not like that. So they just stood there and and talked to people, but. So if you could just talk a bit about what the approach is when your officers, that's just, I think I've got a couple of other bits, that would be great, just so that it just sort of clarifies it. Like, I think I kind of understand what you're doing, but it's just some people say to me, they turned up and they just stood there, or they had a smile and a chat, and so. It was good to hear that the short-term lets using the council waste services, Lacey, thanks. That's good to hear that that's being clamped down on, because that's something that I've been wanting addressed since I first got in, really. So that's really good that that's happening. On the youth work, it'd be nice to have some examples of projects in Whitstable, and I wondered if you've got any links with the football club, Whitstable Football Club, Tankerton FC, and other bodies which could sort of set things up. Which brings me also to, you're talking about sort of partnership working, and I want to know sort of what there is in Whitstable. You're trying to set up a BCRP. I've been looking up your acronyms, a little acronym glossary would be good. You're trying to extend that to the coast, and you're setting up a CAP. I've looked that up as well, so I know what that is now. And I think, and you're also wanting to strengthen links between councillors and police. And I think this all sort of comes together. If you could include us a bit more, ward councillors, if you could let us know what's happening so that we know when these initiatives are touted, we can help, maybe have some input, maybe we know some people, some suggestions. But it would be really nice if we felt more part of that. I know we've got a partnership at the higher level and maybe at cabinet level, but for the ward councillors, I think it'd be nice to have that, to feel that we're part of that process, not just on this annual sort of conference day, but actually throughout the year. If you're doing something in my ward, it would be really great if someone can let me know, if Jordan can drop me a line or whatever. So, and maybe get together and say, what are your thoughts on this, and have you got any ideas? So I think those are my points. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turnbull. Paul?
Yeah, thank you. I would expect the beat officer to be in regular contact with you. If they're not, then that's something I need to take away, because they should be having not necessarily weekly or monthly meetings, but they should certainly be able to, or you should certainly be able to reach out to them and have a conversation. I meet with the MP quarterly to discuss all things policing in Canterbury, and I would expect them to be having those meetings with you scheduled regularly. If they're not, then I'll sort that out.
I can just quickly come back on
Of course
that. I know where to find them. Obviously with Coffee with a Cop, and I do meet up with them. I'm thinking more. Yeah, so maybe it's down to us to set up something more. I mean, would say Jordan be the person who would be able to tell me about initiatives that were coming up and to seek my opinion or my input? Is that what you would expect? Thanks.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I suppose like anything, it's a partnership. It's got to be two-way, hasn't it? We've got to be reaching out to you to tell you what we're doing, and equally, I suppose it's for you to make sure that you're linking in with Jordan or whoever your beat officer is on a semi-regular basis, just to make sure that we are picking up the concerns and the things that you want to raise on behalf of your community. Because ultimately, that's what it's about. We need to be responding to the things and the concerns that your community are raising to you. And we shouldn't just be relying on one method of that. And My Community Voice is good, but it's one method and not everybody's on it. So it's really important that they've got a really good relationship with their local ward councillors as well. Then in relation to the coast, so we're taking a zero tolerance approach. Obviously, we've done quite a lot of media releases, BBC, Meridian, where we've set out our stall quite early this year. We're very clear. We do not want a repeat of the antisocial behaviour, the violence that has blighted our coastal towns now for far too long. And the chief and the DEP have been very clear in his expectations, or their expectations of me and my colleague down at Thanet as to how we're going to police that. And the expectation is that it's almost zero tolerance. If you are coming to the coast to cause antisocial behaviour or to commit crime, you can expect to be arrested and you can be expected to be dealt with. The difficulty with that is that it's how we do that. So part of it will be that initial engagement, working with British Transport Police and their revenue collection officers, making sure they're visible at the train stations, that they're engaging with them where people haven't got tickets, dealing with it at a very early stage and enforcing that part to it. But some of that is also around education and actually explaining to people that there is a Section 34 dispersal order in place. If you don't leave and you commit antisocial behaviour, you will be required to leave. If you don't then leave, you will be arrested. And we have to give that to each individual person. You can't just shout it at 200 people and expect them to leave. You've got to evidence the fact you've told them specifically to leave. And then if they don't, that's at that point they can be arrested. The difficulty we have, of course, is that there'll be 200 to 300 people on the beach, and we might turn up with 6, 8 officers to disperse that. It's very challenging and very difficult. And British style of policing has, and hopefully will always be, around the ability to communicate and engage and get people to do what we want them to do without resorting to the tactics that you might see in other countries around the world, where they disperse large crowds of people. Ours is a much softer approach, but there has to be a teeth element to it as well. So recently, last weekend, we did have some issues at Whitstable with a lot of people on the beach. There were a lot of dispersals. There were offences that were reported to us. I was actually working. I made sure I was working because I knew it was busy. And then I directed, and we did get in those offenders that were committing those offences. They were brought in the following day and dealt with and given conditions either not to go back to the coast or as part of a community protection notice, conditions not to go back to the coast and actually address the issues with their parents as well. So it's a staggered, tiered approach in how we're dealing with it. But the message is very clear. If you are coming to the coast this year to commit crime and you commit crime, you can expect to be dealt with.
Thank you. And Lacey.
Thank you. I'll just add in regarding the youth offering and what's available in your area. So one of the actions from this year's Community Safety Action Plan is around an opportunity to create an engage forum, which is what we've called it. Ultimately, it will hold all partner agencies, all third sector, voluntary organisations of all descriptions that will have a youth offering. This network will enable all of them to share what they are doing and where, but ultimately collect that as a directory and something that we can then share out. So that is in progress as we speak. And once created, we're happy to share that out with you, that you can then freely share onwards. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Councillor Mackenzie, and then I'm coming to Councillor Ricketts and Bland and Mellish. Yes, I know, but everyone wants to speak, so it's just a matter of coming to you in some sort of order, because your hands all went up at about the same time. So I don't have the technology to measure it. But Councillor Mackenzie.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I had a lot of questions, but you'll be grateful to know I'll put most of them into an email. I'll toss the key ones. So I would like to echo what's been said by Councillor Paget, Forrester and Prentice about parking outside schools.
And I want to thank Councillor Nolan because she actually, I mean, like you said to Councillor Paget earlier to invite you, I actually did invite you, and you came along to both Surrey Church of England Primary School and the Watermeadows Primary School in Hurston, and we actually came to some solutions in those meetings. So I would really advise that to committee members to take that offer from Councillor Nolan, if you can. I would like to ask though, aside from the school operations, is there any data on regular parking enforcement? So in other areas, and is there any data on how long it takes officers to respond when reports of illegal parking is put in, and how many of those reports lead to PCNs? I think a lot of my residents would be very intrigued to see that data, especially in Fordwich, which is blighted with illegal parking. And, you know, there is a real feeling there that, you know, reporting it doesn't lead to anything. So if we can give them some reassurance of what is being done and what can be done, I think that would be really good for them. Returning just very briefly to parking outside schools, at one of the previous community safety partnership meetings, Laura McCourt said that the Think Park Smart a toolkit that's been mentioned this evening was going to be updated. So I was just wondering, you know, has it been updated? And like the one that's been mentioned this evening, is that the updated version from the previous one? I would like to ask, looking at your priorities for 2026 to 2029, I do see that parking and traffic safety has not featured. So I was just wondering, you know, why that is. I understand the priorities you do have there are incredibly important, but you know, could we add parking and traffic as well? That'd be good. On the topic of vehicles and stuff, something that wasn't mentioned is that, or if it was mentioned, I missed it. The vandalism of community spaces. So in my ward, the Surrey football pitch was vandalised by dirt bikes going around, leaving by basically destroying the football pitch. The local beat officer, Amelia Parkinson Willard, was really good with that. But you know, do we have any monitoring of vandalism and action plans for that? Turning to a completely different subject, just real quick, is about drugs. So I'm just wondering, is Forward Trust part of the Community Safety Partnership? They do quite good work locally on supporting drug and alcohol addicts to turn their lives around and get them and you know, reduce that sort of crime. I wonder whether Canterbury Community Safety Partner memberships are informed and trained on the substance naloxone, and whether they know how to administer it and whether they carry it. And for anyone who doesn't know, naloxone is a potentially life-saving substance that can reduce the effects of opioids when someone is overdosed. So it's a really important thing to have. And then finally, a few years ago, on the planning committee, we approved a new youth club for the city centre, which has yet to arrive. And you know, there's a lot of talk in the report, rightly, about how youth services can help us to prevent antisocial behaviour. So I just wonder whether the Community Safety Partnership has been pushing for the delivery of that already approved youth hub, and you know, whether you know if we have an ETA on when it will arrive. Thank you.
Right, who wants to go first? Lacey, Councillor Nolan, do you want to come in then off?
Okay, so first of all, parking charge notice data and issuance of. Absolutely, we have untold FOIs on this kind of data. So feel free to have a look online at those FOIs. If there are any elements or specific areas that you would like that data on, we can run reports to do that. So if it's on your specific ward or particular roads or the ones around schools, just drop me a line. I'm happy to run the report and get you that information back. With regards to responsive nature, we have a mailbox which is monitored 7 days a week, because we work 7 days a week, which is called Parking Inquiries at canterbury.gov.uk. The supervisors monitor that mailbox, and depending on staffing levels and priorities in terms of sort of joint operations they may have that day, or particular taskings and locality of those, depends on our ability to be responsive. I wouldn't have times recorded in terms of responsive nature and PCN as a result of those. But as I say, if there are specific locations, I can run a report and get you what those volumes look like in that locality. Think Park Smart Toolkit, indeed, it was updated. That was what the relaunch was just before the end of the school holiday, the end of the academic year last year. We reached out to all schools with that updated version. So come September, we hoped everybody would be geared up and had purchased or managed to get hold of all of those abled posters and put those mechanisms in place. So yes. Moving on to the Forward Trust, they absolutely are a part of the partnership and involved and entrenched within many of our multi-agency projects across the board. I think I mentioned one of our prosecutions earlier, the graffiti. One of the positive requirements, is what we call them in that outcome, was a Forward Trust referral. So yes, absolutely, they are a part of that partnership at all levels. The substance and the issuance of it, very interesting one that I've not been asked about before. So that's one I'm actually going to take away and speak to partners. We have the operational group that I mentioned in the structure earlier. That's one that I will take to that forum and gain some wider understanding from the wider partnership as to who, how and where on that one. So thank you for raising that. And lastly, City Centre Youth Hub. I will find out the latest update for you. I have seen some recent updates, but I don't want to give old information, so I can go back and get that for you and send that through.
Thank you very much, Lacey. Councillor Nolan, did you want to add anything?
Or simply to say, you're right, this youth hub has rumbled around for some years now, and I'm not sure exactly where we are on that. You mentioned Fordwich as well. If you remember, the council invited me to the meeting. I don't know if you've ever been to Fordwich Town Hall, but you go up a ladder to go into where they meet, which I thought was quite interesting. Fordwich, I think, is very interesting because basically it's a medieval town, of course, I have to carefully say that, which people use the road through it as a rat run. And I think what we really need to do is tackle that rat run, and things would actually, I think, very much improve. But yeah, that's above my pay grade, that bit, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rickett.
Thank you, Chair. Luckily, everything I was going to say has already been said, so I'll keep this mercifully short. It does feel, and I think Councillor Turnbull was saying, this feels slightly hit and miss in terms of the relationships that we have as ward councillors with our beat officers. I think sometimes the coffee with the cop happens, sometimes it's cancelled, and I certainly would. So, I mean, I will reach out and try and improve that from my side of things as well. But I'd also make a plea that parish councils are included in that as well, because it's quite often parish councils and neighbourhood watch tend to coincide, and those are quite often the people that need to be spoken to more often and are most concerned, and can do, to my second point, the vast majority of the job in the local area are about getting that news out that crime is reducing as well. These are the people that speak to people in the area, and quite often, if I notice in the report, the two areas of red against the RAG rating are the issues to tackle the perception of crime, and I think that's quite often the issue. And let's face it, there are some people with a vested interest in making people feel unsafe and that we live in a rat infested hellhole, and you might as well not go to the city centre for fear of never coming back. And actually, I think that we can play a really important role in trying to tackle that, because I think that's something that I hear every single time I come to one of these, that crime rates are falling, that we have these fantastic things in place. I think you see that the work that's being done, but that message just isn't getting across to people at all. And sometimes when I try and tell, I had the lady the other day said, "Oh, did you hear there was a burglary down the road?" And I said, "That's 2 in the last 10 years along this road." And then actually you put it into that, and it's exactly what you were talking about with statistics as well. Is if we can find those really good statistical shots that we would, I'm sure, as ward councillors, be really happy to put out, because I don't think it's a completely apolitical thing, and all of us are very interested in people not being frightened to leave their front door, which is something that increasingly happens. So I'd like to see more engagement, and I will try and up my engagement level with the beat officers as well. But I'd also suggest that going to people where they're meeting as well, rather than holding meetings where you expect people to come to you, I think would be a really good move from that. And certainly in large parts of the district, parish councils are a fantastic way of doing that. So.
Thank you, Councillor Ricketts. Yes, and I would endorse that as well, because I know where there were Kent wardens, they used to regularly attend parish council meetings, which was really, really useful, and it would would be good to have that engagement with local residents. I know for some of them they're a little bit out.
I forgot the good bit. Sorry, we had at the Rough Common and Harbour Down Parish Council. We had someone come in and talk about fraud prevention. It was incredibly well received. The flyers were great. I certainly made sure that the in-laws had a copy of it. A lot of people found it really, really useful, and that kind of thing I think has done more good in the community. Just that one visit than any number of emails will. So I think there are some really good initiatives out there, and that fraud prevention one was really good.
Yeah, I agree. I also went to a fraud prevention one in one of my parish councils, and I agree it was well received. And also anything on marking property, those ones are always really well received as well in rural areas. No, thank you for that. Councillor Bland, please.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to start with a kind of congratulations, really, and I think we should congratulate ourselves on having Paul Sterner as such an excellent crime commander, police commander for this area, and there's no question about it. You're really good. And the first thing I want to say is about your understanding of democratic policing. And you've mentioned a possible worrying moment, maybe that we might face later in the summer or whatever. But your experience around a number of really difficult political demonstrations that have occurred in this city and recently, in recent times, has shown a kind of understanding that policing has to be about a democratic approach, and your understanding that people have a right to protest, but they have a right to protest peacefully, and if they go beyond that bound, then you step in and you do something about that. And I really admire your approach on that, and carry on with it. I also admire your understanding about the need for security for politicians and so on, and I do understand that as well, and that's really, really good. One thing I will mention on that, there was, of course, a contentious moment around a police intervention with a pro-Palestine demonstrator at the local roundabout. But again, I think you stepped in, and actually your way of handling that situation was something that diffused something that could have become much bigger. And I want to thank you for that as well, because I'm pretty sure you were behind turning that situation down. So well done for that. What I want to do is talk about a little bit about rural crime. Not that I am pretending to be an expert about it. I don't actually do it myself, at least not yet. Some people might think I have, but anyways, we'll see. But I have got a question about rural crime, and this is me trying to learn about it. It's not that I know more about it than the police do or the people that live in the rural areas know about it, but I'm trying to learn about it. And I'm really interested about the Rural Task Force, which I think has actually been really effective in terms as far as I can see from the figures, and I have been looking at the figures this afternoon for the last 12 months and so on and so forth. It's been really effective in terms of, bringing down some of that really major property theft that farmers were experiencing an awful lot of in recent times. And I think the Rural Task Force has really helped, bring that down a bit, which is excellent. And in other areas, the Rural Task Force is really good. But I'm a bit puzzled about the picture about crime in rural areas. Now, the one thing about crime in rural areas is that there isn't much of it, so far as I can see from the figures, and that's very positive. But what I see from the figures that are reported on Police UK and even Kent Police, etc., is a particular pattern which is different from the urban areas. And the pattern tends to be that the most frequent crimes are of violence or of sexual nature or of antisocial behaviour or stuff like that, and less so around other kind of property crime, vehicle crime, and all the rest of it, and so on and so forth. But we're talking about small numbers here. But do you have any idea why is that picture so different in rural areas to urban areas? Why is, whilst they're small numbers, why are offences of violence apparently higher than other property offences in rural areas? What's going on, and how do we turn that around?
That's a really good question. I'll probably have to come back to you if I can, because obviously we need to understand the context. And when you're talking about such small numbers, where your sample size of offences is so small, you've got to go into the intrinsic detail of each particular report to understand why. Now, sexual offences in the rural, that's quite a broad category. It could be domestic related. We certainly don't have people going around committing sexual offences randomly in the rural parts of Canterbury. So, if you've got 5 reports of sexual violence, I'd need to go and look at all 5 to actually understand who's committed it, what was the actual context, and I can actually break that down for you into each individual ward as well. So the data allows us to do that. So if any of the councillors have got concerns about a particular crime type in their ward, please email me and I'll be able to send you that data, and then also a sanitised, redacted report in relation to which crimes have taken place, because obviously we can't identify victims and we can't identify suspects necessarily. So, but it's not something that I would probably be comfortable giving a position on at the moment, because I simply don't have enough information.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you very much for that. And I'm not saying it's a big problem, because I don't think it is. As I say, crime in rural areas is really quite low, but it's just that funny topsy-turvy pattern, and I just wondered whether that was a blip. Yeah, so I will do that, and thanks for that, and it'd be good to be able to reassure people around
Thank you,
that.
Councillor Bland. I will presume that there's an opportunity difference as well, because there are more targets in an urban area than there are in a rural area.
It could be a whole host of things. If I take, for argument's sake, recently Herne Bay, we had a spate of burglaries, I think, that occurred, and that was because we had a particular individual who's now been arrested and charged for all of those burglaries, which we put out a media release for. But actually, they don't live in Herne Bay; they've actually come down from Darlington. So that particular spike in crime has been caused. So when you look at the figures, suddenly our burglary for non-dwelling, so shops and restaurants and pubs, has rocketed. We've had 5, but it's significantly distorted the crime data. Now that's not because of any other reason other than the fact that this person happened to have come down and committed those offences on us. It's very difficult to prevent that. So again, it's having that understanding of the context behind who the offender is and so forth, if that makes sense. I'd need to do a lot more research before I was comfortable.
Well, thank you very much for that.
Right.
And last but not least, we come to Councillor Mellish.
Thank you very much. And just on that sort of following that line, actually, we had a drug dealer killed on the roads in Beltinge in a so-called road accident, but it was by a fellow dealer. And I understand from Inspector Fodham that the number of drug deal crimes that fell for the first few weeks after his death. So yeah, I can see what you're saying about crime figures. I'd like to reflect on the comments that were made by Councillor Watkins in terms of it's really grateful. I think we can see the difference of having a police presence in Herne Bay on a continuous basis. Certainly in terms of antisocial behaviour, a classic example might be the racist assaults that were being perpetrated on German students arriving in the car park in their coaches. They may sort of, Sieg Heil and things like that being shouted and being berated inside the coaches. That it hasn't stopped completely, but it has decreased the occasion rather than a pattern of every week of something happening. We still have an issue, for instance, the toilets in Mortimer Square are having to be closed prior to the schools closing, because of the damage that's being done at the moment. And it may we've seen how that works, how that may need to be closing during the summer holidays as well. But that's under discussion at the moment. And I hold my counsellor surgeries in the local library on the high street, and again they are subject to abuse from youth. One case dropping their trousers, but sexist, racist comments being shouted at them. And when the local PC is trying to get access the CCTV from the library, has been told that you can't access it by Kent County Council. Now that might be a policy thing of theirs, so I'm not releasing that sort of information, but perhaps that's something you might ask of your colleagues in other parts of Kent or at KCC. I have raised this with Paul Chamberlain, the Reform Councillor for that area, but again, we're not having a response at the moment. So there is an ongoing issue, and I'll ask for the information in an email in terms of the people the youth that you showed doing the training for antisocial behaviour. What were drawn from the Herne Bay area, and what sort of results are you having? Again, it's always the same cohort of kids that are perpetrating these sort of crimes, so having these sort of issues, and that would be interesting to see how that's following through, and how that might be picked up in the next plan. I've got two in particular, two pubs on my patch. One on Mortimer Street, one on the corner of High Street and Station Road, which are corny phrase, but they are drug dens, basically. They are a centre for drug dealing, for drug use, for alcohol, violence, racist, attacks, fighting, urinating, vomiting, etc. And these are known spots. I'm sure you know the places I'm talking about. I have, of course, referenced my community voice to the neighbours about trying to get these things reported, but they are so intimidated that they are very scared about reporting it completely. And I know that Inspector Fodham is doing an initiative on the one on Mortimer Street. I'm not quite sure how long the steps is taking on that. But I'm just wondering where these spots are known, it might be across the district as well, not just in terms of Herne Bay, that it could be a more one-to-one interaction with residents in those areas to try to make them feel more comfortable of actually being able to speak to police because the intimidation can sometimes be very real. Which can happen at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning because they know where the reports are coming from. So that more collegiate, more sort of involving discussion with those residents would be useful. And finally, Chair, if I may, on the taxi drivers training, I'm really interested in this sort of program. As a DFL, so down from London, when we first arrived here, the number of racist and homophobic conversations that a driver wanted to try to start with us and to tell us, and we to tell them that we weren't interested, were uncomfortable in some ways. That stopped. Well, that's gone down quite a bit. You still an occasion to say, nah, not for us. Keep it to yourself. But I was wondering how you get into the Uber drivers. Or these sort of independent drivers, not working for a particular. They're meant to be employed by Uber, but we know how that works. I wonder how you're going to get into them and bring them together as a collegiate body as well to get that change in their attitudes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mellish. Lacey, do you?
Thank you. So on the first point around the particular two licensed premises, I talk with two of my hats on here. So one of them being the community safety arm, the other being the licensing arm, obviously collectively working with police CSU and police licensing as well. So if you would like to drop an email to our community safety unit mailbox, which is literally csu@canterbury.gov.uk, with those particular locations, not necessarily even the properties where those individuals feel concerned, what the officers will do is a letter drop to the locality, reiterating that if there are any fears or concerns, the multiple different ways that they can report that information to make sure that we do get it. Quite likely that officers are aware of particular locations and action is underway. But I don't want to make that assumption, so please ensure that that information is shared with us and we can take any necessary action to support, reassure and obviously enforce as a last resort. Regarding Uber and our relationship with them, we have got a relationship with them. We've got clear communication lines. We have quite recently had a number of interactions over particular licensed drivers. One of those has resulted in a revocation. So just to reassure you that those communications are open. But also we have the annual licensing meeting, which actually is coming up very soon, which is open. We do all the open reporting on. And again, with the training, the taxi training and that handbook, that will be open and shared through to all licensed drivers. Appreciate that some may be licensed by other local authorities and cross our boundaries. So we're trying to work with good practice with the bordering agency, local authorities as well, to see if we can roll out something that is consistent across for all those drivers. So yes, good relationships, information sharing, reassurance and training all in that package. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, well, I think we've come to the end of our session here on the Community Safety Partnership. I'd like to thank Lacey and Paul very much for being here this evening and for their report and for answering so many questions. I think that we've got a lot that's come out of this evening, and some things that we want that have been noted by Marie and by Lacey and by Councillor Nolan as well, that we would like looked into, particularly in terms of schools parking, other parking enforcement, but fly tipping reporting and how fly tipping is being dealt with, and also for Paul on officer engagement for councillors and parish councillors. And there were a number of other issues that are going to be dealt with individually by councillors by contacting Lacey. So I think we all know what those are, and they should be in the minutes as well, won't they, Andrea? So I'd like to thank everyone very much this evening for their contributions. I think it's important to note that in these annual meetings we're having, we can actually see the progress and the influence that is coming through. And so we're very grateful for that, because, you know, particularly from Herne Bay last year, which was the big issue, and how that's now working along the coast. And also from 2 years ago, issues in Canterbury that are now being dealt with. So, yeah, we just have to keep at it in terms of our challenge and our scrutiny on this committee. So I'm grateful to all the members as well for their input this evening, and their consideration of issues across the whole district. So are we all happy to note the report? Yep, thank you very much. So date of our next meeting is Wednesday, 2nd of September, and we'll be looking at finance projects and performance topics. So quite different. Yes, I know, everyone's favourite, but it has to be done. So no urgent business. We don't need to exclude anyone, and there's no any other business. So thank you all at nearly 9:20. So that's not too bad, and see you all on September 2nd. I hope you haven't all melted in